Our final presenter is Miranda Barbosa, a Burhan Civic Fellow who interned at FNE International and RGHA in Leon, Nicaragua, and Crossover Healthcare Ministry in Richmond, Virginia.
Hi, good afternoon. Miranda Barbosa, Jr. And this summer I was originally going to do 10 weeks of global health work in Nicaragua, which had to be cut short, and I spent the remaining 9 weeks of my internship at Crossover Healthcare Ministry for reasons I'll get to in a second. So, our intentions, which this whole presentation is about theory and how that's different from what actually happens, and my fellowship was a definition of things not going as planned. So, I was originally going to collaborate with RGHA and FNE International with this initiative that they were starting called Salud para todos los niños, which translates to healthcare for all children. So their goal was to work, we had already enrolled some families who had children with chronic needs, usually that meant cerebral palsy, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, things of that nature. So we wanted to bring in pediatricians, teams of therapists from the US to kind of provide home visits and any methods that might be helpful to them, etc. So I was going to shadow through that process. So, being from Guatemala, another Central American country, Nicaragua was always known to be kind of one of the more successful countries. I don't know if that's the right term, but better infrastructure, less crime, better economy. Their main source of income is, of course, tourism. So, February 22nd, this was huge. Forbes named León, the city I was in Nicaragua. It's about 2 hours away from the capital. So it named León one of the top 10 coolest cities to visit in 2018. And they showed this picture, and then as a side note, I said, that looks familiar. And so I also took a picture on the roof of that same church on the little time I had to sightsee. So, of course, tourism is their main source of revenue, and that was seen impacted a lot by the events of April 16th, which kind of set into motion a lot of things. So President Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua announced a new Social Security reform in which people had to contribute more to Social Security, but they were going to receive less benefits in turn, about 5% less. So 2 days later, April 18th, protests began not just in León, but all over Nicaragua. And so the elderly mainly protested, as well as their grandchildren, kids who didn't want to see their loved ones affected by this, but they were met by opposition from government sympathizers and people who supported Daniel Ortega, who basically said, let's not do this, things are fine the way they are. So I arrived May 28th, kind of in the midst of this, and so that April 18th is now known as kind of the date of the start of their revolution, because it became about a lot more than just Social Security. A lot of tensions had been building up for a while. So then it became about, we want Ortega and his wife, who's also vice president, we want them out of power. They had kind of turned into dictators. So June 4th, I had to be evacuated, which definitely was right in the nick of time. But I was very grateful for what I did get to do and what I did get to see, because as much as it hurt me that the people had to go through this, experiencing something like that, something not a lot of people get to do. So what does it mean when your country is in civil unrest? What does it mean when your family members are getting killed for speaking out? You feel like you don't have freedom of speech. You can't trust your government. So this is true for a lot of Central American nations. Usually not Nicaragua, but now we're seeing a lot of migration. So Central American countries, Guatemala, it'll be gang violence, it'll be extortion. So for different reasons, but we're still seeing some of the same effects. A lot of people I had met and I kept in touch with, their families left for Costa Rica. A lot of people went north. So what happens when people have to leave their country for whatever reason, but they still need healthcare? A lot of times they'll end up at places like Crossover Ministry. So Crossover is the largest free clinic in Virginia, nonprofit for low-income uninsured patients. So we serve about 9,000 patients across 2 locations. So I was at the I was at the downtown location, which was south side of Richmond, and so the other location is in West End on Quioccasin Road. But so even though our clinic in downtown is smaller, we serve a larger amount of patients. And even though it looks very small, and it is, and needs renovation, we pack a lot of services. So we have primary care, dental, optometry, specialties, psychiatry, you name it. And then we partner with a lot of local hospitals, or I should say they partner with a lot of local hospitals, St. Mary's, Bon Secours, to offer any services we can't do. So for example, x-rays, mammograms, and that's at no cost to the patient. And so in order to become a patient at Crossover, it's very easy. So you fill out an application, it's a one-page front and back, and there is a spot for a social security number. Most of our patients have nothing to write in that spot, and that doesn't matter to us. So they also have to provide a photo ID, which most of the time ends up being the ID that's issued to them in their home countries, or their passport from their home countries. And then we ask for a proof of income, but a lot of our patients don't have income, or whatever the case may be. There's different procedures that go along with that. So again, great mission, a lot of good things that we want to do to help people, but in practice that gets more difficult. One thing I learned in my advisor's class, Intro to Healthcare Studies, was that if we're not on Medicare or Medicaid, for most of us, our healthcare, in the U.S., our healthcare is very privatized. We get our insurance from private insurers, so we're not at the mercy of government policies in healthcare, or in general, as much as undocumented people are. So I'm actually going to start with zero tolerance. So we all know that was a policy put in place earlier this year by President Trump, and I'm sure we've all seen what it did, family separations, and that was just a picture of my friend and I from when we protested on Washington for that particular policy. And so at the clinic, which something that really affected me, so we would get, women would come in, mothers or women who were 7 to 8 months pregnant, and they would say, my husband, my son are detained at the border. So they would be in a foreign country to them, and they would say, I need help. So that was something we had to deal with, as well as immigrant detention. I would be in the room with the doctor and the patient, and the doctor would kind of say, what's going on? Are you taking your medication? And oftentimes they would say, well, while I was detained, I wasn't taking my medication, or I wasn't able to. They didn't provide it to me. So that's also a fail on our system that we have to pick up the slack on. And also Medicaid expansion, which is an amazing thing that Virginia is finally doing, which is great, but poses a lot of challenges in the sense that Crossover currently only accepts uninsured patients, but as of January of next year, that's changing, and we're accepting patients with Medicaid. So a lot of the employees' concerns about this and my concerns were, okay, but what is this going to mean for our undocumented patients? Are they going to receive any less? So just some other challenges that I had to keep in mind and that we dealt with at Crossover. So transportation, when patients miss appointments, maybe 90% of the time plus, it's because transportation issues. They didn't have a way of getting to the clinic. Virginia is one of many states that doesn't provide undocumented people with driver's licenses, which means that people are afraid getting pulled over by the police, fear of deportation. People can't afford cars. Most often Latina moms are stay-at-home moms. They never learned how to drive. So there's lots of things that come into play, as well as costs. That's always the first question we get from patients and their main concern. No matter the diagnoses, no matter what we say that they need, they're saying, okay, what is it going to cost? And oftentimes we don't care because it's about our health. So we'll say, whatever it is, I'll pay it. But unfortunately, not everyone has that luxury. And then cultural stigmas, we have to do a lot of education as far as birth control, and then we offer that. We have to battle some other norms that maybe are being violated. And then other just practices, so Latino food, even though it's very delicious, it's very fattening. A lot of times people eat what they eat in their home country because it's cheaper, because that's what they like, and we have to wean them away from that. Especially a lot of our patients suffer from diabetes, where we have to say, oh, that might not be best for you. And then ignorance and judgment is always something that has to be battled, but not just from outside sources. I found that in the clinic, amongst volunteers, amongst other people here and there, there'd be sayings like, she has 4 kids and she can barely keep up, so now she's pregnant again. And so we just have to remind ourselves that we're not there to judge. That's not what we're there for. We're just there to provide the best that we can for them. And then that ties into ignorance, knowing that a lot of Latinas who are immigrating here are sexually assaulted, raped, as well as by gangs in their home countries, things they're fleeing. Sexism is very prevalent in Latino culture. A lot of times what the husband wants, that's what gets done. So we just have to think beyond what's at face value. And then just to wrap it up, this is a picture that seems kind of random, but I'm here with my mentee, Marlon, who was my mentee since I was a freshman. When she became my mentee, she was also a freshman at a local high school in Richmond. So I've been helping her along through the years. She's like one of my best friends now, and her family are patients at Crossover. So when I help her through her struggles and her family, I always think she gives me hope and that I am making a difference.
All right, well, that concludes the presentation, so thank you very much for everybody coming, and let's give a round of applause to our fellows again. As you exit, don't forget Jeanette's brochure and grab as much food as you want.